So in our unit so far, we have, in our unit so far, we've talked about general taxonomy, what it means, how we give things scientific names, how we write those names properly, how we use a dichotomous key. From there, we started moving into the various kingdoms, and we started talking about some of the characteristics that they have in those kingdoms, examples of organisms in those kingdoms. We talked about the archaea kingdom, bacteria briefly, fungi, protists, plants. And so the last remaining kingdom that we need to talk about is the animal kingdom. And so this is one probably that's the most familiar to us, that you probably know the most about this kingdom. And we're going to talk in a little bit more specific detail about the groups that are within the animal kingdom, the different phyla, some of the classes of organisms. We're going to go through pretty quickly. In your notes, I made it so there's not a ton for you to write because we're trying to move through this unit fairly quickly. So I have a lot of things to explain, and there's some videos and some stories and things, but not a ton for you to write down. So we'll move pretty quickly here. So as you guys already know, as you told me in our question of the day, animals, their general characteristics are multicellular or eukaryotic, and they are heterotrophs. They need to consume other organisms in order to get energy, in order to get nutrition. And so animals evolve a variety of different sort of body plans. And one way to think about them is into two main groups. Animals that have backbones or spinal cords, and animals without backbones. What is the name for those things? With backbones? Vertebrates. Without what? Invertebrates. So we have vertebrate animals and invertebrate animals. Which of those groups is most abundant? You know? That's what a lot of people might say. It's actually invertebrates. Yes, and more types of species of invertebrates. So, is that a vertebrate or invertebrate animal?
Vertebrate.
Yeah, it's a vertebrate.
Invertebrate.
Invertebrate. That's a word.
Oh, spine.
Lobster?
Invertebrate.
I hear both. Who has eaten a full whole lobster before? Are there any bones?
No.
No, they are invertebrates. What about that little guy?
No. Invertebrate. What?
All right.
No backbone.
Baby Yoda, vertebrate, invertebrate.
Oh my God.
Vertebrate. All right. So let's just look at an overview before we get into some details. So all animals in the animal kingdom, we can sort of split them into two broad categories: the invertebrates and the vertebrates. For the invertebrates, there's many phylum of invertebrates. And here are some of them: Porifera, Cnidarian, Echinoderm, Annelid, Nematode, Platyhelminthes, mollusk, and arthropod. There are others. Those are the main ones. We'll talk about them. In vertebrates, as you look at this diagram, how many phylum are there? Just one. All vertebrates are in the phylum Chordata. It means like cord, like spinal cord, because they have a spinal cord. And then within that phylum Chordata are the groups of vertebrates that we're probably familiar with: fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals. And we can go into more detail. Arthropods, we'll talk briefly about some of the classes of arthropods: insects, arachnids, crustaceans, centipedes, millipedes. Those are the classes of arthropods that we'll refer to. All right, so let's start with invertebrate animals. Invertebrate animals, animals without a backbone or without a spinal cord, spinal column. This is actually 95% of all animals are invertebrates. So even though if I were to ask you just, think of an animal, most likely you're thinking of a vertebrate. You're probably thinking of a mammal. but actually 95% of animals that have been discovered on Earth and named as species are invertebrates. And they have a huge range of different body plans and different characteristics. They go from very, very simple organisms like a sponge. A sponge is an animal. And we'll talk about why, because it has all the characteristics of an animal, all the way up to more complex animals. So we'll talk about them phylum by phylum. Some quickly, some in more detail. So look, you have a question, Dana?
Yeah, so with a sponge, like a sponge that you clean things with?
Not a green, bright, fluorescent green sponge that's in a rectangular shape. That is a synthetic sponge. This is a natural sponge. I'll pass it around. You can touch it. Don't break it, please. But you may have seen these like in some fancy like Bath and Body Works store. You can buy these and use them in the shower. It's called a loofah as well. You might put a small one in with like a hermit crab to hold water. Sometimes they're used in art for like watercolor paintings. Yeah. Well, you can get real ones, but you can get fake ones. So this is what I'm holding on to is the leftover sort of skeleton of a once living sponge. So there's no more living cells in here, but when this was alive, it was anchored to the ocean floor somewhere. And the way sponges get nutrition, they don't move around and grab things, but they suck water in through all these little holes in their body, and they filter out little bits of food that's in the ocean water. And that's what they digest and consume for their energy. They don't have tissues and organ systems. They're just a collection of cells. So they're a very simple type of invertebrates. They have what we call asymmetry. You probably learned back in elementary school, maybe in math, what is symmetry? Jack? Jake? Yeah, something that has like a pattern to its body, like two equal sides, or several lines of symmetry that you might be able to draw. Sponges don't have that. They are asymmetrical. That means they have no symmetry. They also don't move. They're filter feeders. We're going to talk about several invertebrates. That's how they get nutrition. They're filter feeders. They filter little bits of things out of the water. They come in a variety of colors, shapes, and sizes. Yeah, they're really interesting kind of creatures, and they come in all sorts of patterns and so forth. That's cool. All right, another group that you probably are familiar with. Cnidarians. Cnidarians are invertebrates that have radial symmetry. What is radial symmetry? Anyone have any idea what that means? What? Yeah, they're like a circular pattern. So like you could draw several lines that divide them evenly into different pieces. So examples of cnidarians are jellyfish, corals, sea anemones. One characteristic of these types of organisms is they have specialized stinging cells. So you probably know if you're swimming in the ocean and there's a jellyfish around, if the tentacles of the jellyfish hit you, they could cause a painful rash, sort of.
I don't remember what they are, but like, I think they're baby jellyfish that they like move around. I was in Ocean City, New Jersey, and we were in the water one day, and like we all got out and we felt like itching all over us, but we didn't know what it was. And then we went home and we like took showers, and then I realized I looked in my bathing suit and there were literally crawling things in my bathing suit.
Oh, there's still little ones?
Yeah, and they like moved from place to place. So like the week before we were there, I think I was in like Virginia.
Oh, maybe they move in big groups. Yeah. Interesting. So yeah, jellyfish are cnidarian. They come in. Some can be really, really small. Some can be very, very large. They have tentacles and they have these cells on them that basically shoot a little sort of spear into a person or an animal's skin, and it causes that stinging sensation. It's what they use to immobilize and kill their prey that they're going to consume. So some examples of jellyfish, a hydra is one maybe we'll look at later in the year. It's a small little cnidarian that lives in fresh water. Jellyfish, coral as well. Coral that make coral reefs, which you probably have heard of. A coral reef is basically like a collection of minerals that form, and inside of the little pockets of this mineral formation are these little cnidarian organisms that live in there. They're called coral. So let's look at some pictures here. Oh, sea anemone as well. This is a hydra. It's really small. You would use a microscope to look at it in detail. That's obviously a jellyfish. These are like bullseye jellyfish. We sometimes go down to South Carolina in April, and you see a lot of these bullseye jellyfish washed up on the beach. Yeah. So if they're alive, their tentacles like you could pick up by the bell of the jellyfish is what's called the jellyish part. You can pick that part up. It's their tentacles where they have those stinging cells. And some jellyfish have stinging cells, but they are not able to get into human skin. They're not strong enough. They just are used generally to immobilize small prey, so they actually can't sting you. If you do get stung by a jellyfish, the old wives' tale of treatment, yes, doesn't actually work. So I would not suggest having somebody pee on your jellyfish sting. When you go, if you're in a place where there's a lot of jellyfish, typically the lifeguard station would have like a spray bottle of vinegar. The acid in the vinegar can neutralize the stinging compounds, and then you're supposed to scrape out the stingers like with a flat surface, like a credit card or something. You can just scrape them off. That's the proper treatment.
This is something
Like baby ones all over, so they just kind of stuck on you, and it just like pinched and hurt for a second.
Yeah, and they have different levels of stinging ability and compounds. Some can be deadly, like box jellyfish can be deadly to humans. And also there's you ever see? I used to see in Florida the Portuguese man of war. It's a little bubble. Actually, that part floats along the top of the water, and then their tentacles sort of trail behind them. It's another common type. Some jellyfish have bioluminescence, meaning they can generate light like a firefly inside of their bodies. They have these really elaborate patterns that are really cool. Sea anemones? What? Sea anemones? Yeah, some of them can be slightly mobile. There's actually some types of hermit crabs pick up sea anemones and put them on their shell as protection. And so predators don't bother them because they have a sea anemone on their shell that would sustain any predator.
That's where Nemo lives there.
What's the connection?
Nemo.
Where's Nemo live? In anemone. Clownfish have evolved to be able to go within the tentacles of the anemone without getting stung. They formed a symbiotic relationship with the anemone that protects the clownfish, but at the same time, the sea anemone gets little bits of food that the clownfish brings in. Yeah.
So wait, we can watch the video?
What? No, not right now. Echinoderms. I'll pass around an echinoderm.
So first we have
This is an echinoderm exoskeleton. Pass around, be careful with it, please. Okay, back. So these echinoderms, they have a body plan. Does this have symmetry?
Yeah.
This would be what type? This is radial. It's organized in sort of a pattern like spokes on a wheel. Okay, that's called radial symmetry. The name echinoderm, it means spiny skin. Derm, like a dermatologist, a doctor that takes care of skin. Echino means spiny. Echinoderms have a very spiny skeleton that they build. What you're passing around is the leftover skeleton. The organism inside of it is died. There's no more living cells, but the exoskeleton remains, and that's when you find the starfish. It has one body opening. It takes in food through that opening, digests it, and then any waste comes out of that same opening. So some simple invertebrates have a one opening body plan. They can move. They have these special little feet called tube feet that they use to crawl around. They have a really amazing ability to regenerate. If any portion, if a starfish loses an arm, it will grow back. If you cut it into two pieces, any part that has this central area will regrow into a whole new starfish.
So you can have one, you cut it, you can get two.
Yeah, so there's a story that fishermen, so people going fishing would catch starfish sometimes in their nets and be annoyed because you don't really eat them. And so they would chop them up and throw them back in the ocean because they were mad. But in reality, they're just making more of the starfish. Because they can regenerate.
Isn't like the middle of it like the mouth?
Yes, underneath and the bottom and the middle is where they take them. So examples of echinoderms, sea stars, sand dollars. If you ever went to like a shell store, those little round sand dollars. So yes, those were alive. They're just like this. So what you get at the shell store or you find on the beach, it's no longer alive. It's the skeleton that sand dollar made that's left over. They can move, those sand dollars move. I have a video I can show you. They move around. And so another example, you ever see a sea urchin with all the spikes? That's also an echinoderm. Here's a live sand dollar. They sometimes have color to them. They have these little feet on the bottom that they kind of move around. They're also filter feeders. They suck up water and filter out little bits of food. They have these little tiny, like, they're called tube feet underneath them. Yes, Sophia? Well, if like just the end of one got cut off, that would have grown a new starfish. But if any part that has like this central area would grow back into it. Yeah, you could. All right, well, I'll show you a couple of videos because these are just cool. Nah, not really. All right. So, worms actually are not one phylum. So there's actually different types of worm. There's roundworms, segmented worms, and flatworms. So worms have what we call bilateral symmetry. Bilateral symmetry means basically it's two equal sides. Like if you fold it in half, you have roughly equal parts. We have bilateral symmetry, right? You draw a line down the middle of a person, we have two equal sides, 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 ears, and so forth. So that's the kind of symmetry that worms have. And there's a huge variety of worms. Some are free living. They live on the soil or in other areas in the water, in ocean water, fresh water. And some are parasites. And I'll tell you some examples of that. So what does it mean if an organism is a parasite? Not always latches on, but invades or lives in another organism, and it harms its host. So parasites gain usually nutrition, or sometimes, all right guys, listen, or sometimes a space to live, but at the same time they harm their host. And so that's what a parasite is, and I'll again tell you some examples here. It feeds off of another organism. So one example of a segmented worm is an earthworm. We've all seen earthworms. Another example that's related, also a segmented worm, is a leech. Leeches are a type of worm that lives off of what? They live off of blood. They attach to a host organism or an organism. They bite it. They actually, in their saliva, have a compound that stops the blood from clotting. And then they fill up their stomachs with blood from that, their prey. And then once they're filled with blood, they fall off, just sort of go to the bottom of the water and digest all that blood. So they can get on humans. They don't generally feed it because humans can take them off very easily and feel them. Although their saliva also has a compound that numbs the area, so the animal doesn't know it was bitten by the leech. But first, they can bite a person, but you ever see the old movie Stand By Me?
Yeah.
Yes.
So they come out of the pond, they have leeches all over.
What is that?
It was based on Stephen King movie from the 80s.
Or the dinosaur.
Wait, is that the one with the go in the fight too?
Yeah.
Alright.
Other examples, we might see a planaria this year if we do this activity. Is a flatworm. It's small, and it has also an ability to regenerate. Another one that you might have heard of is heartworm. So if you have a dog probably at home, you may give it every month a little, looks like a treat, but it's actually a heart medicine.
Oh my god.
Called Heart Guard sometimes, that's the brand name. And that medicine is to prevent your dog from getting infected by a special type of flatworm that is a parasite, and it lives in the circulatory system of an animal. And I'll tell you in a second, and it lives off of their blood, but it can reproduce and become so large and numerous that it clogs up their heart, and their heart doesn't work more, it can be fatal to your animal. So that's an earthworm. That's a leech. That's the planaria, the flatworm. This is another flatworm. It's called a fluke. They often live in oceans. They have very colorful patterns. This is the heart of a dog. That all this stuff that you see white, it looks like spaghetti. Those are the worms that have damaged this dog's heart and interfered with it so much that the dog died from this heartworm infection. So, all right, are these questions about heartworm? Olympia? Humans don't get infected by heartworm. Somebody asked how these things spread. So how could your dog get it? Or there's other worms, parasitic worms of the digestive system. Some tapeworms live inside of an animal, including a human's digestive system. They attach to the wall of the intestine. And then as that individual eats, as food's going by, the tapeworm takes some of it and uses it for energy. And then they grow, they can reproduce, and they can grow so much that they actually clog up the intestine of that animal. It can be also fatal. So how do they spread? Let me give you another story. I have lots of stories. My dog, when I first got our dog, one of the dogs we have right now, she's a Chihuahua Carnicer mix. She's a little black yippy dog. But anyway, when we first got her, I have two stories. So when we first got her, well, let's go back earlier. My dog that passed away, my first dog I ever had, I was taking her out in the backyard one time to go to the bathroom, and I took her and she went, and I looked down at the little gift that she left me, but I noticed on top of it was something, a little thing that looked like a piece of rice, and it was moving. It was an actual segment of a tapeworm. The way tapeworms reproduce is they grow in segments. And my dog had tapeworm, and inside of her digestive tract, one of these segments breaks off once in a while, and it comes out when the dog goes to the bathroom. Now, if another neighborhood dog came in my backyard, and you know dogs like to sniff around where other dogs have gone to the bathroom, if another dog came over and that ingested that tapeworm, then they would be infected with it. And so I just took the dog to the vet, and they gave her one pill, cured the infection. It wasn't a big deal. Second story. Almost all dogs, soon after birth, are infected with intestinal worms. They get them from their mother, from their environment. And so typically when you get a new dog, they have to be dewormed first. You ever hear that?
Yeah.
So when we got the dog now I was talking about, when we got Molly, we got her early for some reason, and she wasn't dewormed yet. So we got her, she was really young, like 6 weeks old, and so we had to give her the deworming medication. So I didn't really know much about it, so I just gave her the pill, and she ate it. She was just a little puppy, she was really small, like this thing. But then, about for 24 hours, anytime she went to the bathroom, it looked like a plate of spaghetti. Because all of these intestinal worms that she had were coming out because this medicine kills them, and then they all come out as the dog goes to the bathroom. And there were like huge amounts of them. It was really gross. I never
So is that
expected
normal?
It is normal. Usually before you like adopt a dog, they've already done that at the breeder or wherever you got your dog. And you don't have to deal with it, but yeah. I should have taken some pictures, sorry. All right, question, Devin? Yeah. So yeah, Devin asked a question. I have a video about this. So there is lots of parasitic worms, many of which cause infections in humans. This is a guinea worm, which does get into people's body through dirty water. If there's worms in the water, because human waste ends up in the water, sometimes this worm can get into a person through their skin, and then it grows. And the way they get it out is they get like a stick or something, and they wrap the worm around it. This is the worm, this white thing. They pull it out, and they pull it out a little bit at a time, because if it breaks, then the rest of the worm goes back in and just continues to infect. They get a little bit of it, and they wind it along this little twig or a stick or something to get it out.
Can you watch it?
Yeah, in a minute. Caitlin.
If you cut an earthworm in half, will it still?
No, it won't. If you cut off the rest can survive, but it doesn't grow into two
Wait,
worms.
what's the thing with 5 hearts?
Well, they have 5 arches, aortic arches in the worm. Yes.
I saw this lady and she said that she had like the ones that usually only dogs can get, and she would take dog.
Really?
The actual medicine that's prescribed to dogs.
Really? I never heard of that. All right, mollusks. Is anyone familiar with a mollusk? You probably are, yes, because probably you have eaten them. Mollusks include things